Mary,
Hi.
good afternoon. Thanks for coming in. As a starting point, can you tell us who you are and what you do?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Mary, finance leader, and most recently CFO and managing director of JustPark.
Super. And tell us, how did you get there?
It's a long story, but I can go back. I think I didn't really have a route to being the CFO. I wasn't actively looking to be the CFO. I had all my experience prior to JustPark was working in corporate finance, listed energy companies, so a million miles away. The company I worked for previously was US listed. I was the number 2 to the CFO, led strategic planning, liquidity. My team were responsible for speedy execution of capital market transactions. We spun off a number of assets and there was very little left in the company, so I decided it was time to move on. And someone approached me about would I be interested in joining JustPark. And at the time, I was like, a parking company, I don't think it's right for me. And also, as I was in my head, I wanted, again, the number 2 role and maybe a pathway to be CFO of a listed company in the future. But then he explained to me what JustPark was doing, and effectively, in my head and probably your guys' heads, you're thinking of the Ringos, etc. But JustPark, what it actually is it's a decentralized parking network. And so it's the largest one in the UK. So it's not like space in one place like typical garages. It's like in your local neighborhood, your local supermarket, etc. And he said how they'd realized that in part of the UK electrification strategy, that there was a real need for how are people without driveways going to charge their EV vehicles? How are we going to be able to convince them to kind of make the switch? Destination charging and roadside fast charger charging, that's kind of a top up for people who've converted already, and they predominantly have their own home charger. So I was like, actually, I like that. I like the sound of that. Spoke to the chairman. I had loads of questions. Surely this is really different to the existing investor base, the risk profile of a tech startup. And he said, exactly, that's what we need. Someone to come in, help kind of raise funding. Because at that time, we were going to electrify some of those spaces to help bring it forward. And kind of manage that kind of new business inside an existing business. And that's it. I decided to take the move away from big giant mega companies to a 100-person tech startup based in Camden.
Wow. And how was that transition for you generally? Because as you say, it's a very different background that you come from, and then you've got the whole finance team under you managing the whole business effectively from that perspective.
Yeah, I was genuinely very naive. I think that's probably the first thing. I think when I took the role, and I was really keen on making sure, am I the right fit here? Because I knew, I met the leadership team. They were all from high growth companies. I think only one other person had kind of big corporate experience. And yeah, I just wanted to make sure that I didn't go in, I wasn't going to fit, or I was going to be too rigid, or I was going to try and impose a way of thinking or a way of working that they weren't used to. So I was really focused on that, and I felt really confident I could do the job. And then I started, and it was wow, okay, I didn't anticipate this piece or the softer piece. I kind of completely, I hadn't given enough pre-thinking to, or how that was going to work. At the time, I was the only lady on the leadership team as well. So there's an element of you're going in as CFO, you're the number 2 to the CEO. There is no hiding anywhere. If you can be the number 2 to a CFO in a large company and no one really knows you. People are really respectful, they listen to you. But when you're standing up there beside the CEO and chairman, all eyes are on you. And then there's a curiosity, it's who is this lady? And she's got loads of transaction experience. Are you here to sell the company? And that was the question from day one. I was trying to navigate around that. I got really, really good advice going in from the chairman. He said, you've got this lovely period where you don't actually have to do anything. Tell people you don't know. Tell me your opinion. What do you think? And that was a really good one. I spent the first, 2 to 3 weeks there just meeting loads of people. I met nearly everyone in the business, I think, and tell me what you do, tell me what you work on. And it was a really, really good way of getting up to speed, but also kind of broke down those barriers. So she's not some person that's here to just kind of dictate. She's real, she's tangible, she seems fairly a decent person, we'll be okay. I think that people side piece was the one that kind of shocked me. And then also going into a founder-led business versus a corporate. I think as part of those kind of going around to meet people and then looking at the financials, I remember I asked the chairman if he'd pop into the office for a meeting. And I was like, these guys are crazy. I was like, no one cares about making money. They're just all chasing some random vanity metric. And he kind of chuckled and he's like, oh, I think I thought you were going to come to that conclusion. And I was like, you should have warned me. But I think like there's not a huge cash balance in those companies relative to what I was used to. COVID had completely decimated it. Like overnight, the business is purely transactional. So overnight, like, if people are told to stop traveling, no one's parking and revenue drops off the face of a cliff. And so I was like, there's no resilience in the balance sheet. You're very much loss making. We need to kind of do something. So I think my first 2 months were spent going around, kind of formulated a bit of a business plan, and then presented it back to the chairman and CEO saying, we're not pursuing anything that's adding cash. We're not pursuing anything that's adding value. Like if we want any chance of achieving or surviving to meet our long-term targets, we need to change strategy. And the chairman said, I've taught this for a while, but I'm glad to see it in black and white. And then we presented that back to the leadership team and everyone bought into it, which was really, really positive. But again, I think that piece of going in, biting your tongue as people are talking, kind of formulating, adding it together. Does this make sense? Using people as a soundboard. It was a nice transition in, but also gave me confidence quite quickly. I can make a difference here very fast, which kind of reaffirms, okay, this is a good thing. This is a good decision. I'm not a phony type thing.
So you felt there was a level of imposter syndrome at the start, and then you overcame that quickly when you knew you were adding value, or did that not really?
I think there's a level, like my whole career has been taking kind of moves a bit left of field or right of field. Like I obviously moved from Dublin to Ireland at some point, or Dublin to England at some point in my career. I remember I went from, there's a startup in Ireland's biggest energy company where they were given like $250 million, which is a huge amount of money. It's like, we need to get on top of wind farming. So that's how old I am. It's like wind farming was a new thing. And they set up this little division to pursue wind farming. I remember I left audit, banking and audit, to join wind farming. And that was a huge leap. I'd gone from like a whole load of intangible instruments to like a big giant turbine. And that kind of transition, staring at a blank piece of paper, I remember feeling really out of water. Moving from that company then to Centrica at the time was a FTSE 30 company, which was a mammoth beast, and sitting in group finance, I was looking around at all these people who had loads of city experience, and I felt very green, very naive. And again, I think something comes along that you get your head around or you solve, and you feel like, no, I can do this. But I think that important piece of you always feel that phony element, and something will happen, but it's important not to take that jump just because of that feeling. It's similar, I moved from London to Texas. I remember that was probably the biggest element because my husband, we'd been engaged for a year at the time. We were planning a wedding, and work said, would you go out to the US subsidiary to lead the finance and technical accounting functions? And I was like, oh, that sounds really interesting. Like, who gets to work in America? Came home, spoke to my fiance at the time. I was like, right, we're really into this. And then they're like, oh, he can't go. You need to be married. And so we came back, we had a conversation, told work to give me a week. Took some time off, went to Vegas, got married, came back. It's like, oh, we're ready to go. And I remember I was sitting there, and the finance director of the whole Centrica, I was in group strategy, came up to me. He's like, did I hear you just got married in Vegas at the weekend? I was like, yeah, I'm going to Houston. So that type of thing. But I remember actually that we were sitting in Houston. It was before my first day of work. And my husband had given up on his job. We'd abandoned all our wedding plans, completely eloped, got married by ourselves. And I've never felt so unsure of, like, I hope this works out. It's like, it was just like, if this doesn't work out, we've just moved away from all our family and friends. That was huge. I remember my husband actually talked to me, like, I was completely worked up. And then, again, started work, got into the swing of it, etc. And things kind of, you're like, no, I can do this. It's okay. But it's that jump beforehand where you're kind of thinking through, can I do it? Definitely. Going into JustPark, I didn't have it as much. It was more like I was confident I could do the job. It's when you get in there, though, and you start realising other pieces like the soft skill side, it's like, actually, I didn't anticipate being CFO was so far-reaching or so visible, and I'd forgot to think that through. But again, the more you get into it, you kind of, things happen, you start to reaffirm, close that gap a bit.
Was there any obvious differences working in the US, like from a working culture perspective, that you really noticed?
Yeah, there's loads of differences, particularly like Houston, Texas is very culturally different to London. People work really, really hard. I don't think they just work. It's like it's a good thing to be seen in the office late. There's a perception if you take holidays or if you clock out at 5:30, maybe you're not working as hard. I've never bought into that. I remember there was a chap that used to work in my team. He was a financial accountant, and they only get 10 days annual leave a year. And I was saying, you need to take holiday. He used to take like a long weekend for Thanksgiving, and he used to go on a golf trip with his dad, and that was it. And he had a child, and I was like, you just need to go. You'll be a better person. You'll come back refreshed, etc. So that kind of idea. I was on a UK contract as well, so I had like all my UK holiday. And they thought I was just flitting about left, right. And so I was like, it's good for you guys to be doing this as well. So I think that piece, that kind of concept of work smart, you don't necessarily need to be present. You can be a great person, fantastic at your job. Just do it in your time, be flexible, etc. The people are super friendly, like super, super friendly. We moved over, I think like late September, start of October. Thanksgiving then is in November. A friend of mine that I'd known from Centrica previously, she invited us out like to her family Thanksgiving dinner. I remember, you take off your coats and you put them into a room, and like on the bed, instead of the coats, it was like everyone had their gun in the cartilage. So things like that were always a bit of a culture shock, but it didn't take away from the fact these people were super, super friendly. Yeah.
Excellent. So you came back to the UK after that. And obviously, you talked about this risk element. You've kept taking risks. Is that something you found throughout your career? You said it's been really important to you, and you'd advise other people to kind of just go out there, take those risks, and see what happens for you.
Yeah, it's funny. I don't perceive them as risks. Mm-hmm. I perceive them as like, this is a challenge. Like, I'm not saying I'm going to leave finance and decide I'm going to become a marketeer. Like, that would be a massive risk. I can tell you right now, I'd be useless at it. It's more actually these kind of skills I have here are transferable. I think I can do this. I'm confident I can do it. And yeah, you've got that feeling of can I, and the imposter syndrome, etc. I think if you ultimately, like, being a leader is about experience, isn't it? It's about, if you're like a C-suite person, you're not leading like a team of 4 people, or you've got people that like have similar functions reporting into you. It's about, do you understand different ways of working, how different teams align behind different metrics? Do you understand how to communicate to different people? Because certain people relate to certain metrics, others won't. Like the job of a CFO is kind of taking a strategy, translating it into metrics, and then helping the business understand, are they moving towards those metrics to achieve the strategy? And that is through experience and the ability to communicate, and that does require people to move outside their function. So if people's ultimate goal is to become C-suite, I would definitely say don't be nervous. Just think about what parts of this can I do, what parts can I achieve? And the other bits, you'll kind of grow into it. If you're going into a role that's very similar to where you've come from, or you can definitely do everything you can do, you're not going to learn anything. You're not going to build your experience. You're not going to that depth that's required to like lead a wider organization. So I would definitely say it's essential. It's a horrible feeling, and at some point it turns in from like imposter syndrome to, I've got a bit of excitement about this. You kind of begin to get more comfortable with it, but don't be shy about it.
How much did you lean on mentors making that transition as well to number one role during that time?
Yeah, so the chairman of JustPark is ex-private equity. He was the person that said to Anthony, you need a more experienced CFO, joining the finance team. Anthony actually didn't like me at first. Oren said, you need her, or you need someone like her. So I met with Oren over the phone. We had a few questions. He was like, come in and talk to Anthony. Anthony claims he couldn't understand a word I said. I said, is it the accent? And he's like, no, you're just way too technical. But Oren, I don't know what happened. I could tell Anthony wasn't that. He was just a bit like, she's crazy. Then I got called for the next interview, and I got the job on the back of it. Oren was very much, yes, it's scary, your mindset's different, the way you work is different, but that's what the companies need. At that point, it had been around for 15 years. And it's like to make that next leap to get to profitability, to have any chance of funding the EV story, like it needed that kind of maturing of the finance mind and the way the company was operating. So he was brilliant. At every point I said, like, these guys are nuts, or I'm not too sure what they're doing. Like, why do they care about how much they're processing if they're making no money off it? He was the person that said, that's the way these businesses work. Great minds build great businesses. People need to operationalize it. People need to make it a reality, etc. So he was fantastic, and he was there the whole way through to the exit. He was brilliant.
And obviously, after you had a look around, that you pivoted strategy based on what you found. How much was it sort of? Obviously, you got strategy here and then finance underpinning it usually, but obviously you'd come in and sort of looked at things and said, guys, this is not commercially viable at the time, and changed it. How did that all stitch together in terms of finance and strategy?
They're kind of one and the same thing, isn't it? Like, I was bought in, how do we fund the EV business? So this is a business, huge potential. I genuinely believe that the timing isn't right because of the macro factors, Ukraine being invaded, the microchip shortage, the timing just didn't work out. But in a startup tech company, there's a limited cash runway, and there has to be some road to viability, or else you're going to run out of cash or be forced into an equity raise. And so that's what I was looking at. It's like, well, how long can we leave the EV business burning cash? And it's like, actually, the whole business is burning cash. And so it became like they kind of had to go hand in hand together. If we want a chance to give this a runway, we need, like, this core business which has been around, we need to sort it out. And they bought into it. They were like, that change in strategy wasn't me coming up with new products. Like, that is not what I do. It's not, I would be absolutely useless at it. It was more like, this part of the business is like an absolute gem. We should be like, why are we allocating resources to this side when we should be allocating? It was so simple. The results spoke for themselves. It all happened quite quickly once we kind of pivoted, refocused, figured out actually we should be prioritizing thinking about these things, not thinking about how much we're processing, but actually what's allowing us to create cash to kind of build up that balance sheet, rebuild after COVID, etc.
You must be like really proud of the fact that you did take it through to exit. Could you just tell us a little bit about that process and obviously the outcome and everything as well?
Yeah, so it was wild. I think when I as I was saying, when I joined JustPark, it was mainly about the financing for the EV story and like how can we electrify spaces. When those macroeconomic factors hit, that wasn't viable. So at that point, we'd already turned the business around. We'd started to become profitable, which was brilliant, started to slightly build up some cash, which is fantastic. The EV piece, we had to just put the brakes on. It's like we just didn't have the balance sheet to keep investing in it. But we were profitable and we'd figured out, we're like, we can do this. We've renegotiated our payment contracts. We've restructured how we do payments. We are flying on all cylinders in the core business. The parking industry is quite, it's not as modern as like other industries. And there's like, at the moment, this huge amount of consolidation happening in it. We were sitting there going, actually, if we raise some money, perhaps we can start doing some of this. We can go into Europe. We can start like acquiring, consolidating. We know how to make this work now. So it switched from let's raise money for EV to actually let's get a bit more cash in the bank. Let's start now talking to people. Can we get an investment because we think what we've got is really good and we'd like to go further afield. We knew we would need significant investment. We didn't have the balance sheet built up to be able to go into a new market and have the resilience and the runway to kind of keep going. So knew we would need quite a big investment. So we started that process and then someone found us. So just roughly around the same time, Anthony and I flew out to America to meet them. And they were fascinating characters, brilliant, huge synergies, really obvious synergies. But around that time, we had been offered a chance to participate in M&A activity. And it was initially, we'd said no, it would be too much of a distraction. We know what we want to do. We're consolidating, we've got this on. And then the price reduced dramatically. And we were sitting in the airport and we're like, what do we do? We're about to go out to America to speak about JustPark as it is. This is really exciting. The chairman messaged us both, get on the plane. He thought we were going to turn around, like, let's just go for it. So we actually paused our activity, pursued this, didn't work. As with all deals, when there's one deal, there's a million failed deals behind it. That fell through, but just around the time it was falling through, the American company we'd met kind of reached out to us again. And ideally, I think I was kind of saying, can we take a little bit of a break? We've just gone through a process, got very far in it. Let's rebuild the cash, like let's exit the year on a really nice, like high growth number, kind of it was like, no, we kind of going to need to do this now. So then it became a case of, right, we need to execute really quickly on all these high growth things to demonstrate we can do it, start that process. It's really, particularly for a company that's never been public, the importance of putting a forecast out there and meeting that forecast as you go through that process is so intimidating. And I think people just all of a sudden there was huge pressure, like this is the revenue number, are we shipping, what are we shipping to move this number? You know, like guys, this is all in the pipeline, we just need to ship it a bit faster. Unfortunately, it happened to be a really, really wet autumn last year. So I remember for the first few months, because we have various different parts of the business, and we kept saying, like as we were talking to the company or the private equity guys, oh, it's really wet. Well, I was just like, they're going to think this is all we say for everything. It became the generic excuse, but the core business line was like hitting and exceeding. So that was good. Moved towards it, signed a letter, and then started DD process. So JustPark has never done a proper DD, and it's 17 years old. Like there was elements of like physically going through the safe, David, the financial controller, like sitting in the safe, Victoria, who's been there for years, the FP&A director going, I know where there's more. Trying to even build up that data room was phenomenal. I think the biggest kind of, just kind of going back to stuff, like all my previous experience is big companies. And so when you do that, you have an in-house legal team and they manage legal. And then you have a commercial team and they're managing the commercial negotiations. And then you've got people like me responsible for the structuring, and I'm doing that type of thing, reviewing the commercial contracts. In a situation like JustPark, it is just you. There is no, like, I am the lawyer, I'm the GDP expert, I'm the FCA expert. And you've got a legal team, but they're reliant on you. It's not like I can hand them off to a legal team. But the team we had in JustPark was phenomenal. I hired an M&A integration manager, a lady called Melissa, unbelievable, just knew how to do this, kind of got the grayness around trying to build up a data room for a company with 17 years of history, a really good sense of humor, which matters. And then David, financial controller, absolutely brilliant, tax, financial accounting control, sat there, waded through 17 years of share options, just unbelievable at being able to decipher and kind of be on par with these people from the other side that were asking tax questions, etc. And then Victoria, the FP&A director, she's been with JustPark, I think, over 6 years, knows the business inside out, but her ability to manage big data is phenomenal. And so she was responsible for kind of reconciling all our commercial forecasts back to the financial model. And it's quite a big thing, like when you've got 10 million people hitting a website a year, like that's a lot of data. And so Victoria played a huge part in helping give them credibility and visibility of how our data sets were actually reconciling back to that big financial model. But that was the internal team, like that was it. On the other side, then you've got 2 private equity houses and their team of lawyers. And it was it's pretty phenomenal. We obviously had a legal team was fantastic. But again, they were quite, everything just feels so small compared to that corporate world. It's a huge mammoth task. But
was the hardest bit for you just the sheer volume of stuff that you had to do in the period of time? I guess it takes a toll, doesn't it? Like on energy and...
Oh, it is. It's... Just to talk back. That's kind of how I felt some nights. No, it is. It's the volume of work is huge. The variety of the work, the context switching, if that makes sense. It's like you're having a conversation about GDPR and then you're like, actually, I've just got a question about this commercial, and it's like, oh, where is this? And it's a constant context switching. I think that's why it was really important to have a really solid team, because they were able to manage some of that. I think as well, the other part that was difficult is, like, Anthony was brilliant, but we had to stop him putting stuff into the DD room because he gets so excited by data and he would upload stuff. And I was like, Anthony doesn't reconcile to everything. So I'd have all these PE people coming back to me saying, this doesn't reconcile, this is different. I was like, what have you put in there? It's like, get it out. So it was all, the relationship was all fun. Like the whole situation, the dynamic, it was wild. The volume of things was huge. The depth and breadth of things was huge. It was a crazy, like I moved into the Holiday Inn in Camden. I became first, I had my own room. Like I knew the guy behind the bar, his fantasy football team. Like he was brutal at it. I was standing there going, we would have a chat about fantasy football, kind of at the close of every week, what we were doing with each other's teams. But just the availability and to churn through that amount of stuff to get a deal of that size over the line was, it's pretty crazy.
And how did you feel when it was done?
Oh, delighted. there was no words. There was so many twists. I can't describe it. There's so many twists and turns in that whole journey of it because things pop out of nowhere. You know, you just don't have all the history. You do, like something could. We've 10,000 investors in JustPark, so it was a huge investor base to try and get like managed, geared up, ready to go, etc. I remember on the morning we were going to announce it. We wanted to tell the company first before, because we have like a huge amount of public sector contracts and we needed to notify them as soon as we signed for change of control clauses, etc. And the meeting kept me delayed. I was like, I haven't got 2 signatures back, because like this is in the primary SPA. And so I was like, delay it an hour. And I could see people knew something was happening and people were walking by my desk and I was just like, oh my God, will they go away? But then we decided we're going to do it. Like the guy was saying, he's literally with a risk committee. They're in Jersey, etc. So they started gearing up to get ready to do the all hands presentation. And I ran over going, we have them all. And I've never felt such relief in my life. It was brilliant. I think the other part, like, so ignoring that piece, the other part was there's some people there, like Anthony's obviously been there 17 years. Judy, the chef's been there 8. There's a lot of people that have been there for a lot of time and really, really believe in what JustPark do, have been part of that story, blood, sweat and tears to get it where it's like helped to come out of COVID, etc. And seeing that they all have share options. Everyone in JustPark had share options. And seeing what they got and how they were rewarded, it's a really unique experience. Normally in big corps, like that just doesn't happen, and it's kind of like life-changing money for people. It was a really, really nice, happy feeling. People couldn't believe it had happened. And obviously it's not like the idea of the acquisition is not like, oh, JustPark is ceasing to exist. It's like this enables JustPark to go global. Mm-hmm. So it's like this huge opportunity for the business as well as people getting a reward. 17 years as transactions finally happened. So it was amazing. Yeah, it was really good. It was a really good vibe. Yeah.
Is it a buzz you'll look for again? Because it's an interesting one, isn't it? It sounds like you've given so much and there's that elation that comes from the transaction. Like some people get the bug for that and they just want to do cycle after cycle. Is that... I don't know.
Yeah. So if you talk to me, I think we talked the day after, and I was like, if I even think about it, my husband will divorce me. It is exhausting. Like it is so, particularly because that 3 years, that 3 year cycle actually was the company is loss making. We need to turn it around to be profitable. That was hugely draining because there was a huge lot of decisions that were made there that. On paper, you're like, it's cost reduction or, and it seems all very black and white. But when you're the person delivering it and you're watching the culture being impacted, it's really like emotionally exhausting. And then to go out of that into, we think we're going to do this M&A activity. We're not. And we're now going to do an exit. Like I was exhausted. And I have 3 young children. And so I remember I rang my husband. I was like, it's done. It's finally done. And my daughter was in the back seat. We're getting Mammy back. So there was loads of, like, I gave a lot to it. My family, like, it's not just me. It's my family gave a lot to it. That being said, I really enjoyed it. Like, I look back now and I've had a break and... like it is a bit like having children. You only look back and think of the positives, and there's a lot of effort that goes there to like having a child, etc. But I think if I was doing it again, there's loads of lessons learned. I think, but I really, really, really enjoyed it. I enjoyed helping make this a reality for it's what people think about when they set up a company, isn't it? And it's like I helped make that a reality, and. A lot of people benefit from it, and it's just it is very rewarding, like in every professional, personal sense. It's fascinating. So I wouldn't say I would rush in and do a series of cycles back to back, but I do feel like I would do it again. I found it quite enjoyable.
We'll have to make sure your husband doesn't watch this then.
He said he can see the switch in me. Like I was so tired, even in the run up to it. I'd come home from the Holiday Inn. I had a ridiculous like pink bag that my child gave me, so I was kind of carrying that around me, and I was very tired. But he said he's noticed towards the end of the summer I've started talking a lot more about like, oh, this is happening or this is happening, and I can feel I'm quite refreshed, and he's anticipating it's going to happen again. But yeah, it is lessons learned for all of us. Like, we're going into eyes wide open if I do sign up for that type of role.
What advice, obviously every exit is going to be different types of exits, but based on what you've experienced, what advice would you have for first time CFOs or first time exit leading into that from what you've learned?
The first, you need a robust financial performance. So there's no point, if it's your first CFO role and you're excited about the sexy exit, take a step back. The company needs to be in a good place, or else you're going to get torn apart. Like, most of these companies have never been through a proper DD cycle. They've never had the numbers scrutinized. They've never had, are these unit economics sustainable? Like, you need to make sure your company is fit for an exit. And that's the first kind of piece. The second one is hire a good team. And that's what I was saying. Melissa, David and Victoria were absolutely crucial to it being a success. They worked equally long hours in their specialities. They were the right people to have there. Just recognize what are you good at, and then for the parts that you're not good at, hire to replace, make sure you've got a solid team in there that can do that for you. And that was a team of effectively 4 people internally did an entire exit. So it's not like you need hundreds of people. It's just hire the right people. And I think the other thing is you just need to not take the whole process too seriously. Like, if you are coming from this side of the table and doing the exit from a company who's never done it before, things come out of the woodwork. It's never perfect, and you can't expect perfection. You just need to roll with it, figure out how to problem solve. There was a few instances where I'd be there at 12 o'clock at night, and it's like, right, this isn't critical, it's not going to break it, put it in the SPA as a we're just going to say we'll take any liability if this happens. Do you know, really small things? It's don't get bogged down. You just need to have that kind of context. If you're expecting everything to go smoothly, it's not. And just enjoy it. Just really, really enjoy it. It's the impact that has on not just your life, everyone's life. There's not many times you get to deliver that type of thing.
A lot of people will be wondering how you balanced that during that period, and then also, I guess most people that we speak to who go through that exit process are men. That's just statistically how it is, and we know the numbers on men in leadership roles and CFO roles. What are your thoughts on that?
I would say I didn't balance it. I think maybe going back a step. So I have 3 children. Roisin, Saoirse, Caden, all strong Irish names, loads of vowels, no consonants. So at some point we had 3 under 3. And so very early on, I've always liked what I've done. I've only worked for 5 companies in 20-something years. I pick a company I like. I pick a company I'm aligned in values. I've always just got to really like doing what I'm doing, like the company I'm working for. My husband was absolutely amazing product manager for a huge company, but didn't have, so he was just you love it. I don't love it as much. So he decided to step back and become a stay-at-home dad. I think that definitely brought a lot of balance to our house. He does the school drop-offs, the school pickups. Without him, none of this would be feasible. What I've got there in a few years' time, possibly, but what I've got there today with 3 young children, not without him taking on the brunt of those responsibilities at home. That doesn't get rid of the mum guilt, at all. I think there's been definitely times where I've missed a sports day or I've missed a school production, and it doesn't matter that my husband's there, it's the fact I'm not there, and that's something you just got to, it's an awful feeling. But you got to recognise, aren't you so fortunate at least one of you is able to make it? You can't be omnipresent at home and omnipresent at work. It's just, you've got to acknowledge you're either one place or the other, you can't be in both. And you've got to just live with that horrible feeling of the mother guilt, because I think it is just the way it is. I think going back to what we were talking about earlier about like making kind of big decisions in career moves, I think a lot of that mentality, which you kind of, you don't realize it's happening at the time. You think, you know, you look back and you're like that feeling of how have I ended up here again, or have I bitten off more than I can chew this time? That mentality of going through, I don't think that comes naturally for women. And it's not that when I talk about you need to get experience of breath, etc. It's not like I have any secret formula for doing that. Like I have those horrible feelings in my stomach as everyone else does when they're going to do it, but it's the ability to recognize it'll be grand, or like I'll get through it. Like you know, you see out there, you know, women won't apply for the job unless they've got all the kind of pints in the sieve, whereas a man will. I remember, like, I have the feelings that relate to that. I get why that stat exists. I remember I was in group strategy and I was leaving to go to the States, and they asked me to do a short list of internal candidates that would be good for the role. And I picked 3, 2 men, 1 woman, all working in group finance in FP&A financial control, so no group strategy experience. The 2 blokes went for it and the girl didn't, and she said she didn't feel like she could do it, didn't feel comfortable. And I remember I spoke to her afterwards saying, you were equally qualified as the other 2. I get why you have that feeling, but you should know, like you should know that you weren't any less qualified. That feeling, or that kind of, to get through there, the exit, etc. I think that mentality you just got to push, and I think women naturally, there is a barrier there, and you just have to kind of fight through it a bit. And the more you fight through it, the more it turns from a feeling of anxiousness to a feeling of like a bit of excitement. And then when you get to a certain level, like 40-something years old, that bit of excitement allows you to be a female that is the number 2 going through an exit process type thing. Like sitting there with a founder. There was no women. Like I think me and Anthony keep laughing at this. And even the internal JustPark team, because the M&A project manager, Melissa is a lady, Victoria FP&A director is a lady, and we were like, we're the only ladies. And I was like, it doesn't change in those big rooms with the heads of these funds. It's all men. So it's, I think the more people talk about it, or the more people say, actually, I don't have a secret formula for this. I did push through those feelings that we all have. The more maybe people will realize. I don't know if men feel it or not. I think this is the funny thing. I don't know if men have the same kind of nervousness or imposter syndrome and they just get over it, or actually if it's just uniquely female thing. But if it is a uniquely female thing, women just need to push through it, because they're more than capable of holding any seat of that room. They possibly have more EQ skills to allow an exit to happen in a way that's not damaging to a business, or to sell a story, or to make sure the kind of the people side of it's kept on track. But yeah, I was very aware of the fact there was not a lot of women even at the table in my exit. And then I'm obviously extremely aware of like all those stats they pull out of the US about S&P CEOs. There's more called John than there is female. It's like, it's insane, you know. So until that path is well trodden, I think people probably need to talk about, actually, this didn't come naturally. I pushed through a lot of feelings of self-doubt, etc., to get here. But obviously, I'm very capable of my job. It's just an internal thing we need to manage.
I was going to say, do you think you've been an inspiration? I mean, it sounds like you have been an inspiration to maybe the team as well, because you've got some female people in the team and maybe others around you to sort of show that what you've done is possible. And do you like to think that you can sort of pave the way for others that are around you, and you've kind of given other people confidence?
Yeah. I hate saying, I think maybe I was in a good example. You know, like, that's obviously, you guys know me. I'm not the type of person that's up there banging a drum. But as I said, when I joined JustPark, I was the only lady on the leadership team, and it's now 50-50. That's not to do with me, but it's more recognising, actually, being a good leader is not about who shouts the loudest. It's about actually the people skills that come with that, and the ability to kind of think in a structured manner and like move a team consistently and like with visibility across like metrics to deliver a strategy. I get a lot of questions about how do you have 3 children, and like how have you got to where you've got in your 40s, and I'm very honest with it. My husband is a huge part of it. It's not tough. It is hard. And I think maybe that piece there is probably the piece that I would say is a good example. I think if people, you often see in the press, you wouldn't ask a man that question. Or, and I get it. But at the same time, until there's like a really well-trodden path, or that stat about John and female CEOs is much more, like if that's completely out the window, I think women do need to talk about it. And I think that part about, actually it's really, really tough. If you want to go for it, you have the skills, but just figure out how you're going to manage all that that other piece that goes with being a woman.
You talk about pushing through that. What's the drive, the motivation? There must be something in there that you have that is the bit that gets you through. Where does that come from?
I don't actually know. I've been working since I was very young. So like my first job was like wrapping jelly beans, and then
individually.
No, like I think this is why this used to be such a laughing topic at JustPark, the leadership team. Back in the day, you used to have like a string of jelly beans, like 10 or 12, and they were wrapped in a package. So my job was to put them in. I was really good at it. The guy told my mum I had a gift for wrapping jelly beans. So this is my second career choice. But
bean counter.
Bean counter, yeah. I kept the team up.
Always 10 in every pack.
Yeah. Then went into working in a finishing department of a printing company. So it's like counting materials going into a box. Went to work in a supermarket. I've always worked, if that makes sense. Worked my whole way through uni. I just like new challenges. I'm curious. I think once I get into something, even if I feel a bit of doubt, it's like I can do this. And it's like I like seeing things through to completion. Played a lot of sports back up until I was about in my 30s. It just comes from like, right, I can do this. Let's show it. Let's complete it. So I don't know where it's come from, but a lot of, like my sisters particularly, I was home for Patrick's Day. It's the first time my children were ever back in Ireland for Patrick's Day. And they were watching me upstairs doing meetings. It was really close to the end of the transaction. That's when all the big contentious points come out. And so they could hear bits of the conversation, and they were like, what are you doing? Like this, it just sounds really stressful. And I was like, no, we're nearly there. One more meeting before the parade. One more meeting after the parade. But yeah, it's there. Maybe it's like the oldest of 5 kids as well. If I want to do something, I used to have to do it. It was more like if I wanted to be somewhere, I would just take myself off and go. If I wanted money, I just took myself off and got a job wrapping jelly beans type thing.
Excellent. I was going to ask if it was anything to do with your upbringing, because Irish people do often leave. Obviously, I'm married to an Irish person.
Yeah.
Left the country. People go abroad and work, but there seems to be some sort of grit and determination that often comes from growing up in Ireland. I'm not sure what it is. It's just I don't know what it. I think Irish people are naturally very relaxed. I know, like if anyone spoke to me, like the big kind of stresses in life, Irish people kind of take them a bit slower, if that makes sense. I think that mentality is really, really good. Like stress about the big things, not about like. I can't describe it or can't put my finger on it, but I think Irish people just naturally have a very relaxed way of thinking through things. And then, like I'm from a council estate, 40 years old, like things were just very different back then. My youngest brother, my mum was in hospital for about a year with him. So again, if I wanted to be somewhere, I would just go and take myself. But I wasn't the only child showing up to camogie practice without their parents. Like people, it was just a mentality, as in like it's a way of necessity. If you want to go to the taekwondo fight, just go and walk down the road for a kilometre with your body armour. And it was that type of, that was my upbringing. I mean, it's an amazing upbringing, but it's very different to today. Like I do say to my husband, to my children are very wrapped in cotton wool. Are they going to learn independence? Are they going to learn actually when things are tough, you just keep going? I do worry about it, but then they also are quite young, so maybe I don't need to think about dropping them in a forest and see if they make their way back yet. But I do. It's things like I don't know if you probably don't follow the Irish football team, but Eamon Dunphy, one of the Irish commentators, he often talks about like at one point Ireland were 5th in the world for football.
And he talks about, he's like, because Ireland was a poor country. And he's like, it was gritty, people were playing on the streets, you know, it was playing non-stop, there was no distractions. And now, like, obviously you saw the performance at the weekend, it's a world apart. So I think part of that kind of gritty culture for Ireland is the cycles of it coming through, people just getting up and leaving. It's just a mentality that's there, isn't it? It's like, a very, let's travel the world, see what we can do. It'll all be fine.
What other tips would you have for sort of people that might be listening to this wanting to become a CFO and they're sort of maybe a bit earlier on in their career or ahead of or something like that? I think a lot of people are often asking us, how do I get that top job?
Yeah. I think it comes back to experience. It's like if you're a financial controller and you were an assistant financial controller previously, and then before that, like you were just a financial account, you know, like you were on that very rigid chain, I think you're going to find it really, really hard to be a CFO. Like a CFO is, A, it's a leader of an organization, it's not a leader of finance. And B, it's about breadth and in depth in the way you're thinking. It's about actually what this team is doing over here. Are they moving us towards the strategy? And you need experience and you need variance in what you do. And it comes back to that feeling of don't be afraid, just try it. Like worst comes to worst, go back to be a financial controller. And some people, a financial controller route brings you to chief accountant. That suits some people, that absolutely amazing career path. Don't get distracted by the CFO. It won't suit everyone. But depth of experience, both in terms of elements of finance, businesses, it's like, you know, finance business partnering is so important. If you need to be able to talk to all those people, if you are the CFO, you can't just talk on financial metrics. You can't just talk on financial numbers. You need to be able to talk to the engineering team, product team, marketing team, get out there, get jobs talking to those, understand their way of thinking so you can kind of think about your communication strategy in the future. And I do think changing industry is quite healthy too. It gives you even more perspective, more leadership styles. And that effectively, like being a CFO, you're not like, oh, I'm a CFO because I'm excellent at building a financial model. I'm a CFO because I'm really good at translating what we want to do into metrics and numbers and helping you understand that. And I think that's the important piece. It's at some point it doesn't become about I'm really good at posting journals or I'm really good at writing technical accounting papers. I'm really good at helping you understand what we need to achieve to deliver this strategy. That doesn't come from sitting in the same role or the same linear path of progression.
What was so I'm really interested in this dynamic between you and the founder. Because it sounds like you said when he first hired you, you made it sound like he didn't want to hire you, maybe, or didn't like you. And then my assumption is now at the end, there's this fantastic bond between you, having gone through this growth, this process to exit. But how important for you is that relationship between CFO and CEO and that kind of journey that you went on as well? Because it's probably not all smooth sailing as well.
Yeah. So if you ever ask Anthony about that, he said, it's not that he didn't want to hire me. He's like, I just thought you might be too corporate. So I was terrified of Anthony. Like for the first, I would say, few weeks, founder-led businesses. The founder has built a business. That means they've built every aspect of the business. So they know everything. Like you're speaking to someone and you're like, no, that's not right. Or no, have you thought about this? And it's like, oh my God, am I going too slow? Am I not getting up to speed fast enough? And then if you're in marketing or product and engineering, like Anthony would be, actually in the database it's this, or in marketing, have you thought about X? Like they know everything about the business. That naturally means that they're quite in the detail, but like founders like dream up amazing ideas, you know, they pursue vision. They're not necessarily like actually my financial strategy or how I actually get to an exit or how I achieve being kind of a global parking empire is to do X, Y, Z. And so we have very different mindsets. But I think when I presented the kind of that business plan saying we're prioritizing things that aren't creating cash or not creating value, like what are we doing? I think that opened a new way of thinking. Anthony's phenomenal at receiving feedback. There's been a few times where he's definitely pulled the founder card, kind of going, no, I'm going to do this. I don't care if it's not aligned in the way you're thinking what we need to do, and that's fine. But it's the ability to have that conversation in a professional and friendly manner. Like, I've seen people come in from big corporates and they're having a conversation, and it's not their company, it's his company, and you've got to be respectful of that. They know everything, they want that visibility. It's you need to be flexible. Things change really quickly, especially when you've got limited runway, and it's the ability to kind of recognize these are the priorities. Like, so long as we're all having conversations and we're challenging because we're trying to address those priorities, it doesn't matter if we're completely poles apart. We both know we're pulling in the same direction. So I think, like, Anthony and I, after I got over my initial fear of every time I spoke to him, he told me about something else, we built up a great relationship. Like, we've been traveling together. I honestly, it was one of the most enjoyable working relationships. Just two completely different people, although when we traveled together, we just seemed to be a disaster. We just absolutely, I don't know, we got pulled over in America at one point by the food people. And we were like sitting there joking, and then I was like, oh my God, I've got an orange in my bag. I was like, we're both going to jail type thing. But yeah, I genuinely think, like, when I look back at the JustPark experience, my relationship with Anthony, that kind of just two completely different mindsets, but to be able to come together to deliver that outcome, phenomenal. But the key to that is that, like, I wasn't stubborn in my way of thinking. It's his company ultimately. I am very flexible about, like, in a startup, fast-moving environment. It's not fast-moving because you have to work 100 hours. It's fast-moving because priorities can change quickly. And, like, understanding that, like, actually priorities can change and you just need to go with it. That piece, like, I kind of fully bought into that. I got it. They're the pieces that make a great relationship. You kind of have to have those pieces. If you've got, I want pure autonomy to run my business unit in a founder-led business, you're not going to be happy. It's not going to work. Whereas I don't think I ever had that rigidity about the way I was thinking.
That's a key thing. Again, a lot of people we speak to want to make the move from corporate to startup, scale up, whatever it is. And again, you do get a lot of people in startups and founders who say, no, we won't consider that person. They've only worked in the corporate. They'll be too corporate. They'll be too rigid. We've already talked about that. But as long as they've got that mindset, adaptability, not too precious, can let things go, roll with it. Those are the key things for you.
Yeah, 100%. I think as well, if you're in a big company, like, you've got autonomy to execute a strategy in whatever way you want. You've time to figure it out. You can make tweaks by yourself. But if you're in a founder-led business where they know everything and there's limited cash runway, you don't have that luxury. It's like you have to fail fast and figure it out very quickly. And that is a very different mindset. So if you're like, I want to execute on this strategy by myself, I feel like you coming in and giving input is kind of a slight on my credibility. It's not the right mindset. It's they have to move quicker. They don't have the luxury that you do in big corporates. And that's the key piece. You've got to remember that. It's not like you can sit there building out the most amazing product in the world. Like, you have to start shipping. Like, everything needs a bit of a return on it. Like, you don't have unlimited runway.
I guess as well, every founder's different. And so there'll be some founders that, for example, like with Anthony, you just developed that amazing kind of bouncing off each other, different strengths. So there'll be others where it wouldn't work for you as well, right? I guess it just depends on the person. So that would be an important decision for you or for anyone making that move. Yeah,
I think the parts that I thought made the relationship a massive success where Anthony was always really open. Like, he would, like, being founder, he would get, like, I think he won Parking Person of the Year one year. Like, he was constantly getting approached. He was always so honest about what was going on, what his thoughts were, etc. So it allowed me to, like, actually, I think that's a great idea. Should we kind of double click on it, or should we pursue it, or like, no, I don't answer the call, or please don't, like, I don't, these are my opinions. But that honesty and visibility over these are all what I'm thinking allowed the relationship to kind of blossom. I think if someone is sitting there and they've got a really dogmatic view of, I'm going to drive home this, and I'm going to remain completely closed off, and I am not open to feedback. It's like, well, what am I actually really doing here? Like, I'm not a financial controller. I'm here to either be your partner, and you can't be a partner with someone that doesn't want to talk. So there is companies where like someone just has a mindset of, particularly, and I'm not saying it's all ex-bankers, but some ex-bankers are like, right, the mechanics work like this, and therefore my exit will look like that. And it's kind of like, can you just make sure there's cash flow there? Like, that's not the right role for me. Do you know? And so it'd be just understanding what does a founder or a CEO want from a CFO? Because to me, it's like, I would love to repeat that kind of that partnership. That's like, that made it enjoyable. It would have been completely impossible if Anthony was a nightmare to work with.
So there's a bit of luck involved as well.
There is a bit of luck, because again, I knew he didn't want to hire me. Oren had told me, which is quite a scary thing to do, because I was like on tiptoes around him. But I think the more you get to know someone, like his children are the same age as my children, despite the fact our upbringings, our career paths were, like, he actually was in the Big Four and dropped out of Delight graduate scheme to set up JustPark. And I obviously muddled the whole way through, hated my training contract, left on the first day. So it's kind of like very different personalities, but that's what a team is, isn't it? Like, if everyone on the team is the exact same, you're never going to have the best outcome. And so it was just like a great way of working together, two very different ways of thinking.
But we were having the conversation earlier. I guess you have a few interviews with someone, you spend a little bit of time with them, you have a gut feeling, you do a bit of DD, but you don't really know someone after a few hours. Yeah. And then you go on the journey, and then actually the relationship works, the chemistry is good. So there's a bit of luck there.
I think I knew the chemistry was really good with Oren. Yeah. And I think so I really bought into, I think, to JustPark, the more I got into it afterwards, the more I regret, and it'd probably be a lesson learned for next time, kind of my initial reaction being, I don't think that's the right company. What they do is phenomenal. It's just absolutely, like, to have the largest disaggregated parking network in the UK. Like, if you draw space around any kind of large, like RCP is the biggest parking company, of their car parks in London, like, it's quite, they cover less than 1%, whereas JustPark covers like 70 something plus of London if you do that metric. So this concept is completely different. So I loved the business model, really bought into the EV story. I think in time to come, that will be a huge lever of growth for JustPark. Had really good chemistry with the chairman, and I just had Anthony as the founder. Don't know much about him, but everything else is really positive, and then it did work out. Yeah.
Mary, brilliant story. Congratulations again. I think, people are going to be really interested in that. To go through a successful exit in the backdrop of not many businesses doing that in the recent climate is fantastic. And I appreciate your time again.
Yeah, congratulations. Sure. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, guys.